I am Teacher Model and I will be your science teacher for today. According to theory, the Earth's crust is divided into large plates which move around relative to each other. The movement of these plates greatly affect the surface of the Earth where we live in. Geologic events like mountains, volcanoes, ocean trenches, and ocean ridges are just some of the effects of these movements. From the deepest ocean trench to the tallest mountain, let this video lesson on plate boundaries give you more knowledge about plate movements and how it affects the surface of the Earth.
The most essential learning competencies are: describe the different types of plate boundaries and explain the different processes that occur along the plate boundaries. Before we start with our video lesson, let us check your prior knowledge about the topic plate boundaries by answering the pretest. Prepare your pen and your activity notebook. Read the questions carefully. Write your answers in your activity notebook. 1. What type of plate boundary where two plates pull apart? A. Convergent. B. Divergent. C. Subduction. D. Transform fault. 2. Which of the following is not associated with convergent plate margins? A. Rift valleys. B. Island arcs. C. Deep sea trenches. D. Deep focus earthquakes. 3. Which of the following is not a divergent plate boundary? A. Red Sea. B. San Andreas Fault. C. Mid-Atlantic Ridge. D. Great Rift Valley of East Africa. 4. The Alpine Fault cuts through New Zealand. At this location, two plates are sliding past each other slowly over time. What plate boundary must exist at Alpine Fault? A. Convergent. B. Divergent. C. Subduction. D. Transform fault. 5. What can form at continental oceanic boundaries? A. Trenches. B. Island arc. C. Volcanic arc. D. Earthquakes. How did you find the test? Did you find it difficult? Worry no more, for you will learn as we go along in this video lesson. This video lesson offers you several activities which you can accomplish in 3 weeks. You can write all your answers in your activity notebook and submit this to your science teacher. Let us unlock some terms you will encounter in this video lesson. Geologic feature. It is any physical feature of the Earth's surface. Examples: mountains, volcanoes, trenches, and ocean ridges. Geologic event. A natural event driven by the internal force of the Earth that can change the Earth's surface. Examples: earthquakes, tsunami, and volcanic eruption. Geologic process. It is a natural process whereby geologic features are modified. Examples: subduction process and sea floor spreading process. Let us start our video lesson by answering this short activity. Tell the message portrayed by the picture. Supply the missing letters in the box. Good job! Now let us proceed to the next activity. Study the 3 types of plate boundaries and answer the questions. Questions. 1. What happened to plates at the boundaries? 2. Which type of plate boundaries shows 2 plates moving away from each other? 3. Which type of plate boundaries shows 2 plates moving past each other horizontally? 4. Which type of plate boundaries shows two plates are colliding. 5. What are the three types of plate boundaries? Very good! You're done answering the activity on plate boundaries. Now, let us discuss how each type differs from each other in terms of plate movement. The three types of plate boundaries are convergent, divergent, and transform fault. In a convergent plate boundary, two plates collide or move towards each other. One plate dives under the other while the other one overrides. While in divergent plate boundary, two plates move away from each other. And in a transform fault boundary, two plates slide past each other. You have learned the different types of plate boundaries in terms of plate movement. Let us now apply what you have learned. Identify the encircled plate boundaries in blue circles in the next slide as convergent, divergent, or transform fault. Alright, we're done with the types of plate boundaries. Now, let us move on to the next part of our lesson. Write the one-word answer to the puzzle. Perform the activity on oceanic continental convergence of plates. Study the figure and answer the questions. Questions. 1. What are the types of crust that collide? 2. What geologic event occurs when plates collide? 3. Which type of crust dives under the other or will undergo subduction process? Why? 4. Where does the plate that subducts go? 5. What will happen to the plates as it reaches the asthenosphere, the upper part of the mantle? 6. What geologic features are formed on top of the overriding continental plate? 7. What geologic feature is formed on the oceanic plate? How did you get it so far? Let's perform another activity about oceanic convergence of plates. Study the figure and answer the questions. Questions. 1. When two oceanic plates collide, will there be subduction? Why? 2. What geologic event occurs? 3. What geologic features are formed by the convergence of two oceanic plates? Great job! Keep up the good work. Continue doing the activities by answering continental convergence of plates. Study the figure and answer the questions. Questions. 1. When two continental plates collide, will there be subduction? Why? 2. What geologic event occurs? 3. What geologic features are formed by the convergence of two continental plates? Well done! You have answered all the activities for convergent plate boundaries. Now, let us discuss the different types of convergent plate boundaries. Convergent boundaries can form between one oceanic plate and one continental plate, two oceanic plates, or two continental plates. In an oceanic continental convergence of plates, the oceanic crust dives under the continental crust because it is denser than the continental crust. This geologic process is called subduction, or the bending of the crust towards the mantle. The subduction of plate can cause earthquakes. Since the mantle is hotter than the crust, the subducted oceanic crust melts, forming magma. With the addition of water from the ocean, the magma becomes less dense allowing it to rise and reach the crust, causing volcanic activities on the continental leading plate. For the oceanic plate, one important geologic feature formed is a trench. It is parallel to the volcanic arc and it is also called a submarine valley. Ocean trenches are the deepest part of the ocean. Here are examples of oceanic continental convergence of plates. We have V10Q1W4 oceanic plate is subducting beneath the westward moving North American continental plate, which created the Cascade Mountain Range, a line of volcanoes above the melting oceanic plate. The Andes Mountain Range of western South America is another example of a convergent boundary between an oceanic and continental plate. Here, the Nazca Plate is subducting beneath the South American plate. Another type of convergent plate boundary is oceanic convergence of plates. It happens when two oceanic crusts collide. The denser oceanic crust will subduct and in the process, a deep oceanic trench is formed. The subducted crust moves towards the mantle. Since the mantle is hotter than the crust, the subducted oceanic crust melts, forming magma. With the addition of water from the ocean, the magma becomes less dense, allowing it to rise and reach the crust, forming island arc on the non-subducting plate. The subduction of plate can cause underwater earthquakes that can generate tsunami. The collision of Philippine plate and Eurasian plate about 65 million years ago formed the Philippine archipelago. This is an example of oceanic convergence of plates. Another example is the subduction of Pacific plate under the Philippine plate, which created the Marianas Trench, known to be the deepest part of the ocean. The sinking of the Pacific plate beneath the North American plate, which resulted to the formation of Aleutian Islands, is also an example of oceanic convergence of plates. The third type of convergent plate boundary is continental convergence of plates. It occurs when two continental crusts collide. No subduction process will occur since both crusts are less dense and their tendency is to move up and crumple, forming mountain ranges. The collision of plates generates earthquakes. Here are examples of continental convergence of plates. The collision of Indian plate and Eurasian plate about 40 million to 50 million years ago resulted to the formation of Himalayan mountains, of which Mount Everest has the highest peak. Another example is the collision of the African plate with the Eurasian plate, which created a series of ranges extending from the Alps in Europe to the Zagros Mountains in Iran. The Rocky Mountains in North America are also a result of continent-continent collisions. Excellent! We're done with the different types of convergent plate boundary. Let us apply what you have learned. Supply the needed information in the table. Let us proceed to the second type of plate boundary. Let us start by answering 4 picks 1 word. Write the words being described by the pictures. Perform the activity on divergence of plates. Study the figure and answer the questions. Questions. 1. What happens to plates at divergent plate boundary? 2. What geologic event occurs? 3. What geologic features are formed by this type of plate boundary? Let us discuss divergence of plates. As the oceanic plates move apart, they produce cracks in the ocean floor. Magma rises up from the mantle and oozes out from the cracks like a long, thin undersea volcano. This magma cools to form a new seafloor. Divergence of plate also results in earthquakes. Oceanic divergence of plates produces volcanic activity creating mid-ocean ridges. These are mountain ranges at the bottom of the ocean floor. Seafloor spreading takes place in this type of plate boundary. Continental divergence of plates results in a continental rift valley. Here are examples of divergence of plates. Divergence of South American plate and African plate created the Mid-Atlantic Ocean ridge. Another example of divergence of plates is the splitting of the African plate into two unequal parts. These are the Somali and Nubian plates which formed the East African Rift Valley. The separation of African plate and Arabian plate, which resulted to the formation of Red Sea, is also an example of divergence of plates. The figure flashed on the screen summarizes how divergence of plates happens. Alright, we're done discussing the second type of plate boundary. Let us now apply what you have learned. Draw a happy face if the statement is correct and a sad face if it is incorrect. 1. New ocean floor is formed at divergent plate boundary. 2. Divergent plate boundary creates the deepest and most powerful earthquake. 3. Crusts are destroyed in divergent plate boundary. 4. Rift valley, ocean ridges, and earthquakes are effects of divergent plate boundary. 5. Volcanic activity occurs both in convergent and divergent plate boundaries. We're almost done with this video lesson. Let us now proceed to the last type of plate boundary. Let us begin with 4 picks, 1 word. Write the one-word answer to the puzzle below. Perform the activity for the last type of plate boundary. Study the figure and answer the questions. Questions. 1. What happens to plates at transform fault boundary? 2. What geologic event occurs? 3. Is there any geologic feature formed by this type of plate boundary? Let us discuss the last type of plate boundary. Transform fault boundaries are locations where two plates slide past one another. They are not marked by spectacular surface features, but their sliding motion causes lots of earthquakes. An example of this is the San Andreas Fault in California, which is produced by the sliding of the Pacific Plate and North American Plate. Another example is the Alpine Fault in New Zealand between the Pacific Plate and the Indo-Australian Plate. Great job! We're done discussing the different processes that occur along plate boundaries. Let us now apply what you have learned. Supply the needed information in the table. Then answer the following questions. 1. Which type of plate boundary is conservative, destructive, and constructive? Explain your answer. 2. Which type of plate boundary produces the strongest earthquake? 3. Which type of plate boundary produces the weakest earthquake? Give your insights by completing the sentence prompts. I have learned that. I wish to ask my teacher about. Let us enrich your learnings for this topic by doing the reinforcement. Make a plate boundary brochure, A sample trifold brochure is presented showing the inside and outside contents. Your output will be rated using these rubrics. Let us check how far have you learned by answering the post-test. Read the questions carefully. Write your answers in your activity notebook. 1. What type of plate boundary were two plates pulled apart? A. Convergent. B. Divergent. C. Subduction. D. Transform fault. 2. Which of the following is not an effect of divergent plate boundary? A. Red Sea. B. San Andreas Fault. C. Mid-Atlantic Ridge. D. Great Rift Valley of East Africa. 3. Which of the following is not associated with convergent plate margins? A. Rift valleys. B. Island arcs. C. Deep sea trenches. D. Deep focus earthquakes. 4. What can form a continental oceanic boundaries? A. Trenches. B. Island arc. C. Volcanic arc. D. Earthquakes. 5. What do you call a process of one plate sliding under another plate at a convergent boundary? A. Convergent. B. Divergent. C. Subduction. D. Transform fault. 6. The Alpine Fault cuts through New Zealand. At this location, two plates are sliding past each other slowly over time. What plate boundary must exist at Alpine Fault? A. Convergent. B. Divergent. C. Subduction. D. Transform fault. 7. At what zone does old crust get recycled? A. Convergent. B. Divergent. C. Subduction. D. Transform fault. 8. Where can volcanoes form? A. Subduction zone. B. Divergent boundaries. C. Convergent boundaries. D. Transform fault boundaries. 9. Plates A and B show a divergent boundary. If plate C is adjacent to both plates and does not show any relative motion, what type of plate boundary is present between A and C? A. Convergent. B. Divergent. C. Subduction. D. Transform fault. 10. Plates A and B show a divergent boundary. If plate C is adjacent to both plates and does not show any relative motion, what geologic event is most likely to happen at plate C? A. Earthquake. B. Mountains. C. Subduction. D. Tsunami.
Congratulations for finishing this video. I hope you learned something today. Till next time!